Moving on now, folks. The US Chief of Naval Operations has warned that America's military must be able to respond to a potential Chinese invasion of Taiwan by the end of this year. Admiral Michael Gilday has stated that the Chinese President Xi Jinping's government could attempt to take the island by this time next year, and that the West needs to be prepared for such an outcome. It follows President Xi's election to an unprecedented third term as leader of the Chinese Communist Party. A lot easier an election than that Boris Johnson's facing, I'll tell you that much for free. But with me now to discuss this story further is Major General Chip Chapman, former head of counter-terrorism at the Ministry of Defence. Chip, can I ask you, any moves on Taiwan would be certain World War territory, wouldn't it?
Not necessarily. Both of all the P5 members signed up in January this year that nuclear war should never be fought and cannot be won. So that's certainly the policy position. So we don't really want to go to the right of arc straight away just because there might be tension. What we can say at the moment is following Speaker Pelosi's visit in August that there is an unstable new baseline where there will be increasingly military drills by the Chinese, fast air activity, and giving them the ability to escalate and de-escalate and leading to really an alert fatigue. But you've got to put into context what the professional head of the US Navy really means when he says that. It's his job to be the sentinel, not the optimist, and to make sure that the Americans can have a fight tonight posture. So from his perspective, it's really a plea for readiness, for recovering the carrier forces and making sure that the maintenance program, which has been deferred because of the enduring operations really from Afghanistan and against IS, with the carrier air being used against that, while sustaining its missile and magazines, so the sustainability for the Americans. Because most people actually look to the evidence of the commander of the Indo-Pacific Command, that's the people who would fight any war against China, which was Admiral Phil Davidson in his congressional evidence last year, when he really talked about 2027 being the window from which China may have the capability to do something. That is generally called the Davidson window. So if you were to say, could China fight and win in Taiwan now? The answer is they're building a power projection and blue water capability. They don't have that capability yet, and their ability to sustain an amphibious operation from the Chinese mainland that would see them successful is probably not there and won't be for a few years.
Chip, if we bring it back to Britain, one of my viewers, he's called Stuart, he says Britain would be crazy to enter any war with America while Joe Biden and the Democrats are in charge after what they did in Afghanistan. I mean, many of my viewers, Chip, are of the view that actually we shouldn't be getting involved in any more foreign wars. I mean, what's your position on that?
Well, like anything, war is a policy choice, and whether you join another nation is a policy choice. It is not technically a policy choice if it's in, for example, the European theatre, because that is where the NATO framework pertains. It is not so clear-cut in Taiwan, whether you make a moral choice because of the fact that, you know, we want to support America because of the other benefits that accrue from that. But I generally always say, you know, you have to really look at Vietnam. We made a policy choice in Vietnam during the Vietnam War not to join the Americans there. So you don't necessarily have to, although at the moment, certainly I think they probably would.
We've been hearing reports, haven't we, that former RAF pilots are actually training Chinese pilots and teaching them tactics that are utilised and used by British forces. What do we actually know about this, and how big a security threat does that present to Britain?
Well, to know your enemy is to know how to defeat them. So it is something that worries me. The first thing that worries me is, of course, anyone who joins that sort of circus really has gone against the values and standards that they should have pertain to them when they were in the British military. But let's be clear, people don't really work in an altruistic framework. They're generally selfish. And within that, we use the sort of acronym of being compromised. And the things that compromise people are either revenge, ideology, money, or ego. And it seems in this case that it's money which has compromised them. But it's worth also saying that there was probably a front company for this. It may have been initially that a number of these people didn't realise they were working for the Chinese, although it now becomes quite transparent that they are. So whether they've got any moral and ethical viewpoints which then makes them leave that is we'll have to wait and see.
Absolutely. It's disgusting in my view, if they do well know. But in your opinion then, in a word, we've got to end it here unfortunately, but in a word, which country poses a bigger threat to the West? Is it Russia or is it China?
It's Russia at the moment because they are trying to regain lost territories and spheres of influence. That is something China wants to do, but will do it when they can be sure of victory, be it through war or through other means.
Fascinating stuff, and dare I say, alarming stuff that it wakes us up to discussions around Boris Johnson coming back as PM not being perhaps the most important story of the day. But Major General Chip Chapman, former head of counter-terrorism at the MOD, thank you very much for your time and insight.